Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this edition of the CEO Mastermind.ai podcast, the Management OS. Today, super excited. Tamara and I were just yapping and having a good old time before we got here, so super excited for this conversation. For those of you who don't know, Tamara is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. She is also a founder in the fintech space. She's also a strategic leader, and she really wants to focused on equitable innovation, what that looks like, incredible positive orientation, contagious energy. I'll say that for sure. So thank you for showing your energy here. I will put all the links in the show notes for you to follow her. She's building something incredible, has an incredible story. And we're just going to get into it. So obviously she's been an award-winning journalist. So we're going to go deeper beyond the headline, how that sort of investigative thinking becomes an advantage, and then some of the leadership paradigms which we've talked on here, about how they're outdated, and then maybe talk a little bit about systems, your journey, the whole nine yards. So, Tamara, welcome to the Management OS podcast. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I love it. And I love to hear that my energy is contagious because that makes me excited, especially from other people who don't have to say that to me.
Yeah, true, true. Yeah, the family. Yeah, listen, hey, listen, kid, listen, family.
Yeah.
So great. So thank you. I really appreciate everything you're doing out there. I think the first kind of section I want to talk about is obviously, your history as an investigative journalist and how that curiosity sort of leads to leadership advantage. And I love when people start companies from different areas and then bring that expertise, because the beauty of business and entrepreneurship is there's many skill sets, and different things will bring different paradigms and aspects and perspective to the table. And that's what this podcast is all about, is to talk about those sorts of things. So kind of my first question is how, like, your story goes from journalism, of course, and you went through all of that. Now you're into the fintech leadership. And so some people say, oh, how did that happen? But, there's this essence of complexity, of course. But how did reporting complex stories, sometimes I'm sure controversial, those sorts of things? I mean, that's the role of investigative journalists. And how did that shape how you lead today?
Oh my gosh. It is one of the most instrumental things in what has just shaped me as a human being. And it's funny because people say, oh my gosh, how'd you get from investigative journalist to fintech founder? And when I look at it, I say, easy. I like to solve problems and I like to solve big problems. And what could be a better, bigger problem to solve than access to capital and financial equality in our systems, right? And
Yeah.
so if I back up and I look at my career as a journalist, I spent every day trying to find something that was affecting a human being, making their ability to thrive harder or their health worse, or something that was affecting them on such a deep level that they couldn't get solved, that they had to reach out, and or I discovered it, and I would spend time digging into that, giving all my energy to it to become an expert, to see if I could put all those dots together to then come to either a conclusion or make it something that I could explain so that someone else could help solve that problem. And
Yeah.
what really drove me was the fact that I had the ability to change someone's life. And that's
Yeah.
not something that everybody gets to say. I mean, we've got so many
True.
people that dedicate themselves to helping other people, first responders, doctors, nurses, our military, and that the teachers, you can go down that list. Having the ability to make a contribution that makes someone's life better is so impactful on your own life. And so I did that for years, right? Dug into different stories, trying to make a difference on someone's life or change a system that was affecting, communities. Um, then I shifted into financial news. And so that's where I really got the taste of startup
Yeah.
life. I was talking with founders every day. I was looking at how to grow a business that was doing mission-driven work. And, that really excited me because I got to see how businesses can actually affect people's lives in both positive and negative ways. And so I carried that with me as I continued to do the news for a little bit longer. And so when I decided to leave the news, I thought, well, what do I want to do? I want to work with mission-driven startups to expand their messaging because coming from news, I thought that was the place that I could make an impact. And then as I learned marketing and communications, I got really good at the technical side of marketing. Joined a team that was launching a live selling shopping platform, and that's where I learned how to build technology, right?
Yeah,
I am not the builder, but I love to work with someone who is that technical genius to create something that solves a problem. And that's where you find me now, on my second company, building Empower, which is creating an agentic ecosystem to allow lenders to understand, I call it the new economy, which is gig workers, creators, caregivers, Gen Z, people who don't interact with the financial system like millennials, right? Like boomers. Like
yeah.
the new economy, it interacts with the financial system completely differently. And we have an incredible opportunity through AI to reimagine how we bank and how we do finance.
Makes sense. I'm going to go back. I love that because I want to talk a little bit about that. I love what you said about, as an investigative journalist, you have to dig and you have to find things. And I think what the audience should think about there is, obviously, if you know how to do sales, then you'll never have to worry about paying a bill. And certainly sales is a superpower. And I've had people on the show talk about that. But I think the other superpower, at least it's helped me in my journey and with others, is this superpower of curiosity. Right. You see something, you dig, you look. And I had it, I just updated my LinkedIn profile, but like I had this essence of like at least for me, I connect dots that other people don't see. But that's sort of what journalism is because you're sort of trying to find the truth, right? Like
Yep.
what's actually going on? Is it what they're saying? What's happening? You kind of get into the stories. Is it systemic? Is it an episodic issue? Like what's kind of happening? And when you look at professional sports or journalism or business, they're all very, very similar, in a lot of ways, because you have to be curious to figure out like what's going on. Why am I losing money? Why are customers leaving? Why did that happen in that city? What's happening? Like, we're not gonna talk about world news here, but there's all sorts of world news that's happening right now. And it's sort of like, well, all I know is I don't know. I'm just what I'm told. And so you have to have that power of curiosity as journalists that can kind of bring these things out. And then also as business leaders, what's going on in my business and why. And I think that's a superpower that I think that you have and that has allowed that transition to happen, quite nicely.
Yeah.
Never unpainful, but nicely.
Curiosity and spotting trends. So that's something that I always thought that I had like a gut instinct for, or that I realized I had a gut instinct for, which was spotting something that was a growing trend or something that was growing early on. Being able to have kind of, and this is where you just talk about like gut feelings and trusting your instinct. That was something I discovered that my instinct was very good at saying, this is going to be an issue or this is going
Yeah.
to be big, and then having it proved out.
Yeah, the trend spotting is oh God, so critical. And that, you probably have a whole episode on that as well
Yeah,
too. I quickly wanted to touch back. I'll ask one more question. We'll try to get into the next section, but a couple of things I wanted to say. What most people don't know sort of about the Western economy, Canada, US, probably Europe as well, is that 40 to 50, 60%, so let's say 50% plus or minus of the GDP is done by Main Street, if you will. It's not the big corporates, right? So you've got government, that's a percentage of the GDP and employment. You've got the Fortune 500 world where you and I have worked in our path. But then the rest of it is all that, right? I think
straight.
it's 56% in the US and similar in Canada, sort of the North American market. Anyway, 50, 60 doesn't really matter other than it's a lot. It's almost at least half an economy. And so when you're fact of what you're building, this essence of what I didn't know is this 45 million Americans plus that are this credit invisible. And it's we take it the backdrop of what's happening in the world. I think the world of work has always been in change and flux, but I think about 100 years ago, 90% of us in North America were involved in farming. I don't even
Hmm.
know anybody involved in farming. And so I think the shift that's happening is dramatic, probably more than we think. And I love the work that you're doing because you're helping those who are not interacting with the traditional system, but it doesn't mean that they're no less important. They're contributing economic value. They're taking the money they earn, going to the local businesses, they're investing in the stock market, they're doing all buying home, doing all the things they do. And I think what you're working on Empower is really critical for that because again, you said spotting trends and spotting sort of where we're going. I think that's a beautiful sort of foundation that you're building for what might be the predominant way to go to work in 10 years from now.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting, if you look at there's some really good statistics about how Gen Z is operating with the financial system right now, right? And so
Hmm.
what we know is that they're less likely to have a credit card, which is one of the main ways that as when you're young that you build credit, right? They're less likely to have a credit card. They're more likely to use buy now, pay later for a loan versus taking a loan or using a credit card. Um, and they're probably investing on platforms like Robinhood, right? So they're engaging in actually good behavior, which
Yeah,
is, responsible behavior, which is not taking out a lot of debt, except for we'll put student loans aside, right? Like, let's,
yeah,
that's a different conversation. But we're talking about spending outside of your means with like a lot of credit card debt or so you've got like this different behavior. So how do we help them do things like buy a home? Right? So how do we
yeah,
gauge their credit worthiness if they're outside of what we traditionally say is credit worthy? Because normally it would be you've got credit cards, you have maybe a home loan, right? And so if you don't have a home loan yet because you don't have credit cards, you don't have any credit, how do we look at that? Well, can we look at it and are you investing monthly, right? Are you saving? Are your rent payments stable? How are your utility payments? There's so many other things that we can look at now that actually show your behavior and your likelihood and your predictability than just your liabilities versus your, credit ratio.
yeah. And I love what you said about the behavior piece because it's in, especially in like targeting, like marketing and that sort of stuff. It's not what people say, it's what they do. And I think by focusing on the behavior, it's really critical. What I've noticed, and I didn't know about Robin, I always learn something new in these conversations, um, is the fact of how different the next generation is. And our systems, our education system, our finance system, our judicial systems are built on a different world. And that world is shifting. And what we're experiencing throughout the world is this sort of, I guess you can call it a bit of an earthquake, as things are shaking out a little bit differently for a new paradigm. It's just not stuff that's never happened before. And I
Yeah.
think it's entrepreneurs that spot trends and fix the need because we need people to rise up and say, actually, that's a problem. I'm going to put my hand up. I'm going to go solve it. That you have the vision, you're the visionary, and you have an operator that does the build. You can be one or the other, and you have to attach it to your life's purpose.
Well, and I think, to kind of end on the high note here is we have such an opportunity. I see this as an incredible point to be in, that we have an opportunity to reimagine banking to be more custom, more personalized, better with, financial help, right? Like you can have a financial coach in your pocket now. Just like you
Yes.
have a fitness coach on your iWatch, you should have a financial coach on your iWatch so that you're making the best decisions for you. We have that opportunity now and we can build it. And I think like that's why I'm excited to be doing what I'm doing because it's like this is a pivotal moment that we can jump on and see great transformative change for the better.
1,000%. I think there's no greater time to be alive, to
Yeah.
have the sort of access to these. You know what? There's always been crazy stuff, right? So there's crazy stuff now. There's crazy stuff 10 years ago. There'll be crazy stuff in 20 years from now. But when you step back and look at the beauty of humanity, their ability once upon a time, if someone was, got the C word, it was completely, it's still terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's not a death sentence necessarily, depending what it is, having lived through it, is that like the technology and the benefits that we have, like it's just embrace the power of all this. And that's what I love, because even if you don't have that experience. And that's what I love about this podcast. Someone may not have the understanding to think about a financial coach in their pocket. They'll hear this and sure, whatever. You can complain about the education system, and that's not what we do here. It's like, no, we're going to add to that because you learn different things there that help you to be successful. But then now you hear something, and then all of a sudden, this app or this technology, or you start following someone new that now gives you this source of knowledge that can change your life. And think to your point, that's what I love about the world that we're in. It's like I actually built a web page last night of messing around. And last time I played, I'm gonna date myself here. But last time I kind of played around like that was with MS-DOS 5.1, 6.0, like in the late 80s with my brother was in it. I was a little kid then, but like it's absolutely amazing. And yeah, so I'm super excited for the future, what you're building and all the advancement that are yet to come. I have a very, wrote a whole LinkedIn article about how AI can be used for good, and why not have a 2 or 3 day work day? Like we're trying to have new technology that enables us to do things we've never been able to do, but we're holding on to old paradigms. And so to
Yeah.
your point, you can have 100 different coaches in your pocket. Like even me, I was using my phone to hang up some pictures on the wall, like 8 of them. I'm like, if I got to sketch this out, and I took a picture. This is my boom boom. Yeah, I told me bang a hole here, here, here. Guess what? Now I look like a museum gallery hanger. You know what I mean? It just like took pictures, but yeah, just the imagination's
Yeah.
the only limit.
We were using my team was using Lovable to make our marketing
Right.
material, which I was like, what a great use for this, right? Like, we made all of our decks and our one pagers on Lovable and then made them shareable because we can get a ton of insight on how people are interacting with it. And we can spin them up so quick as well. So we can customize, we can show all these different, journeys, and we can do it faster than we can spin up a deck. So
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, I was actually really excited about um, just how we can use this new AI technology because on our meeting this morning, we then went, okay, well, now we've got an AI agent hooked up to our systems with all of our messaging, and we can have that AI agent update our lovable marketing material and send it out on command. So like, holy cow, like that was
Yeah.
unthinkable 2 years ago.
Yeah. Completely unthinkable. And if we think about the economic impact of this, one of the ratios is productivity. And we can raise the standard of living by technology like this. And I think that to me is a conversation. I don't think it's happening enough out there because you can
It's
do
not
what you
happening.
just said. You can iterate on this work, that doesn't work. Okay. And I think that's how you push the boundaries up into a positive territory because you're sort of not stuck in this, I don't know what the word it might be, but an inefficient world for 6 months. By the time you figure it out to have the impact you want, now what took 6 months can now you can figure it out in 1 to 2 weeks. So you can make a positive impact that much faster. And I think that's where I get excited as well.
Yeah, I also hope, I mean, I know everybody here is, looking for like insight and the practicality of it. So I'll also say to level set anyone who's listening right now, I feel and other executives that I talk to feel like AI takes up more time in their
Mhm.
work life. So I'm still working more, not less yet, because we're figuring out all the systems, right? We're figuring out what works, what AI works in which systems, which ones you like, which ones you don't, which work with your teams. How do like I'm moving my CRM now because the AI integrations with agents that I want for my CRM doesn't work with my old CRM, right? And that's a ton of work to put in. So like to level set, if you're thinking that AI should be giving you more hours in a day right now, you're probably not going to have that happen yet.
Yeah.
Um, just because of it's so new, that transitional phase does make it a lot more hectic. I'm looking for that transition to happen in like a year.
Yeah.
Once once all of a sudden you're a lot more versed in it and you start to get the systems that you like set up, that's when you're really going to see the transformation than right now while you're still setting them up and figuring out how they work with you and your systems and your team.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because I think the mistake sometimes people make is, oh, AI will do that, and you get this robotic slop. And it's like, well, it can, but it's not that easy yet, and I don't think it will be. I kind of liken it to like a rocket ship. we're like in the beginning of a new age where like a rocket ship spends 80% of its time of its energy getting off the ground. That's where
Yeah.
we're at, right? So there's a lot of people like me, like you, like I'm like, shouldn't I be done by 2 o'clock in the afternoon or one? Well, no, because I'm trying to figure out this whole new playbook. Like, will we get there eventually? Probably, but even then, there'll be something else to interest us. And I just find it fun. So the goal for me is not less time, but maybe impact. But I think you hit a very important point. Use it because it will transform and 10x, 100x the impact of what you're making. And you got to put in the energy to kind of sort that out because we're all going to build things differently. The way to our vision, we're all different operators. We will build differently. And I think that's what makes it also unique. So that's a really good point that just invest the time and energy because it's worth it. And, you know, sometimes it's stressful, of course, but I think overall, step back, it's pretty neat. Like I could not have imagined any of the stuff we're doing today
Yeah.
a year ago, even. Like it's like wild in a great way.
100%.
Last question before I get into the next one, because I love you sort of talked about this essence of sort of falling in love with the problem and not the solution. And we've kind of talked about that on the show a little bit, but in the sense of 5 hours, you have an axe, you're going to spend 5 hours sharpening and an hour cutting kind of thing. How is that mindset of falling in love with the problem, not solution, sort of reframe the product and strategy decisions that you make?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're stuck on your own solution, right? So, um, usually when you see a problem, you go, okay, you begin with problem, I'm going to create the solution. If you get stuck on that solution, then you miss the whole journey of finding your product market fit, and how that's going to evolve. I would say I haven't talked to a founder that said their original solution is what they put to market, right?
Hmm.
And if it is, it may have had a hard time, growing with customers because usually you're gonna see the problem and then you're gonna see the group of people that have that problem, and then you work towards your solution, and then along the way you have this beautiful journey that create your product, which usually isn't exactly what you had imagined in the first place. Um,
Yeah,
and so if you're in love with your own solution, you might get in the way of what is really going to be impactful and jeopardize maybe having a much better company. Um,
yeah.
we I don't know if I should say this. We had a terrible saying in the news, that you had to chop out your favorite parts in a script.
Mm,
Like you would become absolutely in love with a section of your script because it was so meaningful and so powerful, but it meant nothing to other people,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
your
yeah.
editor would come in and just cut that out, and you'd
That
be
you
like, oh. Um,
don't think.
but if that doesn't benefit your end goal, then you know you're not being as how do I put this? Your outcome is not going to be as meaningful.
But
There's a good book that I like to read, and it's called Output versus Outcome.
yeah,
And yeah, and when you think about like putting together your work, you're working towards an outcome. And that's kind of like a solution, but an outcome is different than your solution. An outcome is what do you want people to do, right? An out
yes,
so if you have a problem, your outcome is kind of like an action of that problem, right? And so if you look at it that you really want to reach that outcome and the steps along the way, the outputs are not necessarily as important, right? And you want to get to
good.
the least amount of outputs possible to get to your outcome. And that's how you create a better product.
I love I love your focus on the problem because I think when you're right, I don't think enough leaders and founders focus on it enough. The statistics of business failure and percentage of those that get funded by VCs is really, really low. And my observation is what you said is we've all probably done it for sure, is fallen in love with the solution more than the problem. I love how you said that, and it's how you do say that. And it really is important to be obsessed about the customer and the problem they're having and being open. Because I think you might get it 2/3 right, your initial thought, but it's the last mile, it's those refinements, and I think that's to me, that's when we look at the data, that's what separates those that end up becoming larger organizations that have the impact and contribute to society through their economic micro macro impacts and whatnot, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great reframe that you talk about that I love.
Yeah, you don't want to have tunnel vision on that. It also takes a little bit of you have it's a little bit of an ego thing too, right? You
Hmm.
have to be really open. You have to think that a lot of other people have great insight into what you're trying to build, and appreciate that. Because if you try and make people fit into your solution, then again, you're not listening, you're not hearing. It's just I think being a founder is a really complex thing because on one end you go, I have to build this product. It has to be successful and I have to work towards this solution, right? I see the problem, I've got to work towards the solution. I also have to be open. I have to be able to pivot, but not pivot so dramatically all the time that we're losing our goal line, right? So
Right.
like you can't pivot too often. You have to know when to start, swerving a little bit and when to keep your eye on the ball. Um, and you have to have grit and you have to be able to hear no so many times while incorporating the good stuff that you're hearing from the no into the product to make it better. So
Yeah.
being a founder is not for the faint of heart because you're navigating so many signals at the same time and pushing forward in the direction that you can only hope is right.
Yeah, I always use the analogy of noise and signal. And when you're sometimes a lot of noise, but when you're a founder, there is also a lot of signal because you could potentially go in a few different paths. So it's having the courage and having the support group. I think talking to other leaders, like it's definitely not for the faint of heart, and it's you need a champion mindset to kind of get through that as well too, right? So
Yeah.
not
And I would say
not simple.
like you've got 90% of it is data. You should be following data, and then you got 10% gut instinct.
Yeah, I love that, Richard. I've never heard that, Richard, but that does make it. You
That's
know what
my
I'd
that's
say?
just the way that that's my personal ratio
Yeah,
of like because I love data, but then some of it you just have to go with your instinct and say, no, I think this is what I believe.
I always say to my teams, in God we trust, everyone else bring numbers. So I love the focus on numbers, but there's got to be this essence of God, this essence of tuition or whatever your approach might be, whether it's 90-10, whatever, but it could be 70-30. But the point is that at least I agree with, I think the audience would agree with it. It's pretty hard for numbers to lie. So you should
Yeah.
use them to guide you more often than not. And I think this is where the human ingenuity and creativity, and there is a gut. I do think humans have a sixth sense. I don't think agents will do everything all the time in the future because they run on data, a very specific set of things. Even if they're intuitive, they're just not going to be creative like us. And I think that's where we can amplify the magic that we do by understanding that data piece and then overlaying ourselves on top of the data infrastructures and systems that we may build and have agents and automations run. So awesome. Good
Yeah.
stuff. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what you're doing right now about financial systems and inclusion. One of the thoughts, and you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but maybe if you want to go a little deeper, what systemic gaps in the finance side that you uncovered that led to the founding? Was there one specific story or moment, you did the financial news interviews, and I was just trying to a little bit curious to go down that a little bit deeper because that is about the problem, right?
Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time over the last 5 years speaking. I mean, I've worked with a lot of small business female founders. I've advised a lot of small business female founders. And I've worked on financial literacy and financial fluency for actually probably over 5 years now. Time is flying fast. And so I've spent a lot of time talking with female founders trying to access capital and banks who are trying to figure out ways to create better programs for small business owners so that they can give more capital away to them, right?
Right.
And in these conversations back and forth, I kept hearing the same thing was the lack of information going back and forth, right? The lack of being able to understand if this person is going to be able to pay us back and if if we've given them the tools to understand what they need. Um, and then vice versa, the how do I apply? How much do I need? What do I need to do? What is the right fit for me? Um, so there's this huge in between space of data
Mhm.
that is not coming together, right? It's still very manual. Um, right? We're still filling out forms online, giving information that then has to be verified by other third-party data sources, and nothing's talking to each other. And then that goes out into the world, and it may come back to you or it may not, right? Like you fill out a form, you get a yes or a no, and if you get a no, you're kind of like, what happened?
Definitely.
So again, this is like the information disparity. So as I started to look into this issue, kind of like again, I went, this is such a systemic issue. It's been happening for so long. What is going on here? And as I dug in and dug in, dug in, I saw that it's the data issue, right? How do we understand someone and their ability to repay loans or to repay debt? Um, and as I started to dig in deeper and deeper to that, and AI was coming into the picture, I started to realize what a great opportunity it was to solve that problem leveraging AI, right?
Mhm.
But what you need is the infrastructure to pull all of this archaic data together and create simple answers, fast, reliable answers. So that was the impetus of what Empower has become, which is you've got all these data silos and you have to create structured data in order to create good answers. And that is
Right.
really difficult, right? Um, and so when I met my co-founder, this was something that we were talking about. There's a longer story about how we met, but I'm going to skip to the end of this, which is you have to solve that problem before you can then solve the other problems with accessing or with creating a more holistic credit profile of people. And so that's what we did. We started to basically build. We said, okay, first we have to solve the problem of how do we get all this crazy information in and be able to come up with very quick answers, right? Reliable answers, answers that don't
Yeah.
hallucinate. And so
Yes.
we solved that. We call it the universal data translator. And then we built on top of that our business intelligence. So that's then we take the data and we start to create answers on that data based on what our queries are. And then from that, we built our agents, which then our agents are the smart layer that helps make a more personalized, customized banking experience, right? So now you've got the lenders have agents and the borrowers have agents that are able to stay
Mm.
with them through the life cycles of loans. And you can scale this on such a level that everyone can have their own agent, right?
Yes.
Like it it becomes a just such a more incredible experience um, than anything that we have now. So that's how we built Empower and like how we saw the problem and how we saw we had to solve it.
Makes sense. And I think what I want the audience to take away is that you're solving it with like, do you actually think this might have been possible for you to solve before November 2022 when AI came into the world?
No, I mean,
Probably not.
well, I would say so there are different companies that do alternative data credit modeling, right?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's really good people who have tried to solve that problem and have done we've gotten better and better, right? Um, but there's still limits to that, right? A lot of it is still historical. Now what we can do is because we can bring in so much information, we can make it more dynamic, we can make it more predictive, and personalized.
More
So
real
that
time and personalized. Yeah.
and I also should add the layer transparent. So through our AI um, structure, everything is transparent and audible. So you can see why decisions were made, and that's one thing that we've implemented into how we show our decisioning. We show the decisioning to both the borrower and the lender. because
Yeah.
we believe the borrower deserves to know all that information. So, and to
Yeah.
get better,
To get
right?
better. That's where the empowerment comes from.
And so, and the agent can help, like, then that person make, the right choice. The agent, what we have is we also have a decision matrix before the actual underwriting process happens with the borrower that says, hey, based on all the information we have on you, here's the right size we feel for the loan. Now you can still ask for more, but like the likelihood of you being able to pay back is here. This is your safe
Mhm.
zone, right? And that helps the borrower, that helps the lender get to a yes more often. And it helps the borrower not over, what is it? Get over their skis? Is
Yeah.
that the saying?
Yeah. Yeah, there's something like that. Yeah, I know which one you're saying. It's well, I think it's really interesting that, well, in particular, because what you don't have is people don't get an answer. And I love what you're doing, and it's kind of about this sort of a real human-centered design, which is what you're doing, is that everyone can have their agent. It is about the person, their current behavior has allowed them to get X capital. Both of them are on that page. You can ask for more, but they'll probably say no. But by focusing on what good behavior looks like, what we can do, like you talk about outcomes, right? Like what can we do? Take that first loan, go build your company, go do what needs to be done. You know what behaviors they're looking for, and you're creating a very dynamic, as I see it, a very dynamic system that is actually centered, that it's just safe for both people. Because nobody wants to take on more than what you think you can. We always overestimate our own abilities, right? And so it's just human tendency, it's just human nature. And I love what you're doing because you can like have that agent in the pocket that can now coach you throughout your sort of business entrepreneurial journey and fight the statistics of business failure and those sorts of things out there and really up level the level of, really raise the bench on the level of success and impact. That's how you change society. You kind of start with that. So I love that you do. What markets are you currently operating in?
The US. So we're launching in the US.
You're launching that, and it works across all states. Are there any states that are not or just total federal?
Yeah, oh yeah, well, because we aren't the lender, so we're a tool for the lender to use. So we can be anywhere.
They plug in. You can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
that's amazing. Well, I have like 80 more questions to ask, and this was an amazing conversation, and I knew it would go by so quickly. I just really wanted to thank you for your time and expertise, sharing your journey, the power of curiosity. You really focused on human-centered design, right? And really focusing on that problem, focusing on that person, picking a niche that you're really passionate about. And yeah, I just really wanted to thank you. And if you have any closing comments, I'd love to hear.
Oh, no, this was a great conversation. I love talking about this stuff. If there's anyone who wants to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. It's just Tamara Lane on LinkedIn. You can DM me. Love a conversation. If there's anyone who's interested in a demo, you can DM me or you can go to our website, empowerai.com, and click on the demo and we'll get in touch with you. Or if you're someone who's very curious in kind of our cash flow budgeting system that we're creating for the gig economy, the new economy, you can go to empower.money, and that's MPWR.money, and sign up to be on our wait list.
Awesome. I will also be sure to put that in the show notes for you, and I'll be sharing it on all the respective platforms. So thank you very much. Really appreciate what you're building out there. Absolutely incredible, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.